All right, everyone. Hello and welcome to the Co-op at the University of Waterloo webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today from wherever you might be joining, whatever time zone you might be in. We're really grateful for you taking the time to talk to me today and talk to the students that we have on deck to tell you a little bit more about their stories. We'll start off with just some quick housekeeping, some of which I'm sure you've already had the chance to explore. If you would like to see live captions, you can turn them on by pressing the Show Captions button from the Zoom control bar at the bottom of your screen. We also do have a question and answer function. You'll notice that your cameras and mics are off throughout the presentation, but you can ask questions throughout any time that you have one using the Q&A function that's also found along the bottom of your screen. Feel free to truly ask as many questions as you would like throughout the webinar. We'll get to as many of them as we can. We also do have a bunch of folks on the back end supporting in the chat who will answer the questions throughout, and we'll also try to answer as many as we can live at the end of our session. Now, there are a lot of you here today, and we will do our best to get to every single question. But if we haven't answered yours and it's been a few minutes, I would recommend looking at the already answered questions. It's possible that a similar question to yours was already answered. Our priority here will be to answer questions as they relate to the co-op program, as there have been other webinars about applications and admissions, but we'll try to get through those questions as best as we can as well. Please note that while you might be able to see a chat function, the chat is disabled for participants, so you might have some trouble clicking on that if you try to. Now, let me do a quick introduction. My name is Drudy Guliani, and my pronouns are she and her. I am an international recruitment specialist at the University of Waterloo, also a very proud Waterloo alumnus. I graduated from the Honors Arts program with a major in social development studies and a minor in psychology. Today's topic is very special and near and dear to me. I had the opportunity to participate in the co-op program as a student while I was an undergrad. I had some really great experiences. One that I would really like to highlight was a co-op term that was full of new things and firsts. I got to live in Boston for one of my co-op semesters, working at a small tech startup as part of their talent acquisition and management team, a career that I hadn't really ever considered before or pursued or knew anything about, a city I'd never lived in before, a whole lot of firsts in that experience, but I'm so grateful for the opportunities that I got through that and the experiences that I had. Along with my story, you'll also get to hear from some wonderful current Waterloo students who are in the co-op program, and you'll get to meet them a little bit in a little bit. I'll share some general information about co-op at Waterloo before I turn things over to them to hear about all of their stories. That is usually just the best part of any webinar anyways. But today we are going to cover what co-op actually is. So what does it mean when you are in a co-op program at the University of Waterloo? And what sets Waterloo's co-op program apart? So why is that special? How does it differ from other universities? How the co-op process and the schedule actually works at the University of Waterloo? And then we'll also go over the number of supports and resources that you have available to you as a student in the Waterloo co-op program. And then we'll also hear from our lovely students, Roba, Ria, and Vanita. They'll tell you a little bit about what it's like to be a student in the Waterloo co-op program, the types of experiences that they've had, and then we'll also open things up to a question and answer period where the co-op students and I will answer some of the questions that you've asked along the way. So we'll start off with what is co-op. Co-op, or cooperative education in long form, is an opportunity to gain real work experience that's possibly relevant to your degree while earning your degree. It integrates study terms with paid periods of that work experience. It's a really great opportunity for you to test out different careers, earn a little bit of money, and gain experience all before you've actually even graduated. You'll have the opportunity to be in co-op in the majority of our programs. The only 5 undergraduate programs that do not have co-op integrated into them are biomedical sciences, honors science, medical sciences, when you're doing the Doctor of Medicine pathway with St. George's University, geography and aviation, and science and aviation. Now, if you are in one of those programs, not to worry, there will still be lots of experiential learning opportunities available for you. But for the sake of this presentation, we'll focus solely on co-op. Now, at Waterloo, we were the first university in Canada to offer cooperative education, and today we are home to the world's leading co-op program, which we're really proud of. The co-op program is huge. We have twice as many co-op students as the next two largest Canadian co-op programs combined. We have connections with over 8,000 employers in more than 70 different countries. And last fall, we're really proud to have reached an impressive co-op employment rate of 97% across the tens of thousands of work terms that were taking place simultaneously. So just the number of opportunities that are available to our co-op students are very vast. You'll see some of them listed on screen here. Common question that students will ask and that all of you should also ask. We skipped a slide there. A common question that I'll get is how do I find that work and where will I actually get to work? So the over 8,000 employers means that the opportunities are truly endless. We've had students work for companies like KPMG, Microsoft, Environment and Climate Change Canada, Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center, Google, University Health Network, just to name a few. There are so many more, and you can see some of them on screen there. I will also like to point out that for every big name that you see on our employer list, there are just as many smaller companies that give students incredible co-op experiences. I think it's really common for students to expect that the bigger companies is where they're really going to find that their career grows, they build those connections. And while that's true, it's also really impressive to be a part of a company when it's just starting out and you get to see it grow. You get to be part of some really foundational years for those companies. Or if you work somewhere that just has fewer employees and maybe fostering a more tight-knit work culture, that can be really awesome too. So there's no really good or bad way to do co-op as long as you're learning more about what you like throughout. And you'll get that opportunity regardless of where you are. Now, graduate employability is a really important question as well. We talk about how co-op will be amazing when you're actually in it, but how will co-op affect you and your work outcomes after you finish your degree? Well, after graduating, 94% of our students who were in the co-op program are employed within 6 months of graduation, and 82% are making $60,000 a year or more 2 years after graduating, which is much higher than the average of all other Ontario grads. These numbers really speak to how much our co-op program helps set you up for a successful future, whether that's in the industry. I know we're talking about employment rates, but even if you're going into graduate school, further academia, all of that is there as well. Now, one of the many benefits of the co-op program is that you are earning money while you work. On average, students are earning between 38,000 and 137,000 Canadian dollars over the course of their co-op work term, so by the time they've graduated. This number will really range and vary depending on your job experience, the actual job that you're doing, what you're looking to pursue. It can really change depending on that. So not only are you more equipped to be making money when you graduate, but you also get to make some money while you're earning your degree and possibly helping and subsidize your education a little bit, which is really important as well. Now, how does co-op actually work at the University of Waterloo? The structure can vary from university to university, so you can't assume that they'll all be the same. At Waterloo, the way we like to do it is that you apply to a co-op program directly from high school. This means that when you get an offer of admission to a Waterloo co-op program, you know that you're definitely going to be part of that job search process. As a Waterloo co-op student, you'll complete 4 to 6 different work terms or semesters that are typically 4 months long each. These could all be at different employers, or you could return to an employer if you really liked your experience there and they're hiring again. So this means that in 5 years of your degree, you'll earn, of course, your degree, but also up to 2 years of paid work experience. You'll start co-op typically during your first or second year and alternate between study and work terms. And this alternating structure between studying and working means that your classroom learning really supports your workplace contributions, and then your work experience can enhance your classroom learning. So they're both pretty synergistic in that way. It's a really powerful model designed to enhance both of those spaces and really help you get the very best and most out of your degree. Now, another important piece of the puzzle is how you'll actually find your co-op job. Now, we do not place our students in jobs. It's important to know that it's not a guaranteed employment. We know how valuable the job search skills are. I personally like to think that, of course, the job that you're doing, that is really valuable. The experiences you get there, you take with you, but the job search process is even more valuable, in my opinion. When it comes to finding a job, being part of the world's leading co-op program is a really big advantage. That job search process typically happens the semester before your work term, so while you are studying, and our students will talk a little bit about how to balance that. But just like in the real world, applying and interviewing for jobs can be a competitive process. That might make you a little bit nervous, but our co-op students are highly successful in finding employment. You'll have access to a huge library of career resources like getting resume advice, working with co-op advisors, practicing your interviews with your peers in workshops. And then once you've graduated, you'll have so much of that practice that it'll be much easier to land a great job and really nail those interviews. I find that starting a job, while that's of course really stressful and can be really scary, to me, it's not nearly as scary as actually applying and interviewing and going through that process, figuring out how to market yourself and talk about your skills. But if you've gone through co-op, you have done that process dozens of times, if not more. So while it will always be a little bit nerve-wracking and intimidating, it definitely becomes easier the more you do it. So to sum it up, before each work term, that's when you're actually applying for your job. So that's when you're working on updating your resumes, you're submitting your job applications, you're doing those interviews with employers and accessing all the resources while you're at it. And then when you're on the job, that's where the real magic happens. That's when you're gaining those real world skills and work experiences that we're talking about. You get to adapt to different workplaces. Again, you'll hear from our students in just a little bit about how, some of them have worked at bigger companies, some of them have worked at smaller companies, some of them have done research or industry, so many different spaces. And you really get to figure out which space, which type of managerial style, what are those things that really help you thrive in a workplace and a work environment. So you get to adapt to different ones. You get to take professional development courses through our Center for Career Development. So students before their first work term will take PD or Professional Development 1, which is career fundamentals. That's where they'll work on those resume skills, those interview skills, and all those kind of things. But then throughout your co-op terms, you could be enrolled in ethical decision making, conflict resolution, intercultural skills, just to name a few of them. There's a big variety depending on what you want to focus on as it relates to your professional development. Of course, on the job is when you earn the money, and that's great. But you grow in confidence, knowledge, and certainty about your career path. This might mean that you gain confidence that what you're planning on pursuing as a career, what you're studying, is something that you really like and want to do. Or on the other side, you might find something totally different that you like. You might realize that what you're studying is maybe not something that you enjoy doing in the real world. All of that is still building your certainty in what you want to do in the future. And it's truly a privilege, in my opinion, to have the opportunities to learn that and learn more about what you like sooner rather than later so that you can make the appropriate adjustments to your plan. Now, a great aspect of our co-op program being as large as it is that we can offer a lot of support to students, as I'm sure our current students will touch on as well. Although co-op comes with a lot of benefits, and we've highlighted some of those already, it does take a lot of work, but you're definitely not alone in it. Along with the peers that are actually applying for jobs while you're applying for jobs, there are also hundreds of thousands of students that have gone through this process before you, and have succeeded. So you're definitely not alone in the stress that it might come with. Every co-op student is also assigned a dedicated co-op advisor. So similar to how you have your guidance counselor right now in high school, how you will have your academic advisors to help you through that academic trajectory, you will also have a co-op advisor to help you with all things career related. So of course, they can help you before your co-op work term, and during your co-op work term as it relates to adjusting to your job or applying to your job. But even after your co-op work terms, just getting general career advice, mentorship, that's what they're there for. We also hold a ton of workshops, so you can get help writing your resumes. You can practice your interview skills with your peers, with other year students that have gone through the process many times, and you can get assistance in actually searching for jobs. And when we're talking about searching for jobs, we're really proud that we have our own job board that's exclusively for Waterloo students. So when co-op employers that we work with are hiring, they post their jobs to Waterloo Works, which is the name of the job board currently. And that's where you would be able to see them, filter through the ones that you like and you're interested in, and that's where you would actually submit your application and hear about next steps. So you're not competing with other students at other universities. It's a job board that's exclusively for Waterloo students. Okay, I'm going to pause from talking. I would love to hear now from some people who are currently experiencing Waterloo's co-op program. So we'll start first with Roba. If you could turn your camera on, could you please just tell us a little bit about yourself, what program you're in, and what year you are in, how many co-op terms you've had?
Of course. So, hi everyone. My name is Roba. I use she, her pronouns. I'm in my third year of health sciences and I've completed 3 co-op terms and will be doing my fourth in the winter.
Third year, almost done.
I know.
Crazy. I know you've had quite a few different co-op jobs in research and lab settings. So can you tell us a little bit about those jobs? Have they been pretty similar to one another, or what have been their differences?
Of course. Okay, so my first co-op placement, I was working as a bilingual research assistant. And so that meant that I actually got to live in Ottawa, which was just really special for me because I actually did French immersion. So from first grade until 12th grade, I was doing a chunk of my courses in French. And so getting to now continue speaking the language in our country's capital was just a really cool experience. And I got my first exposure into research. I was working in an office, I was working with my supervisor, and I got to do, it was, the topic was like environmental psychology, which was related to health, which I thought was really cool. But it made me realize there were some parts about research that maybe I wasn't the biggest fan of. One mainly was that it was a lot of computer work, which is great and important, but I was like, I like interacting with people. I like getting to talk to people. And that actually leads me to my second co-op, which is this photo here. This was my term at Humber Polytechnic, and this was my lovely team there. And so essentially, I was working in an anatomy lab, and there were students who were learning to be nurses or learning to be paramedics or massage therapists, and they have to learn their anatomy. And so my job and my fellow coworkers and co-ops there, our job was to teach them anatomy, which was just such a unique experience because I'm still here, I'm still a student, I'm learning anatomy. I was literally had just taken my first anatomy course right before I got this job, but I had the experience to really just understand and learn more, not just for myself, but to teach people who then go on to use that knowledge in their own respective fields, which is super duper cool. And so that was my second co-op placement. And then my third one was actually, I was working as a digital communications assistant for the School of Public Health Sciences, which basically meant that I was doing social media for my program's Instagram account. Shameless plug at Waterloo SPHS in case you want to go check it out. But that basically meant that I was making content. I was helping like build that feeling of community within students in the program. And it was actually a lot of fun. I got to edit reels and I really enjoyed doing that. And I got to do it for work, which is something really unique. And I was also working within my faculty. So that meant I got to connect with other professors and faculty and staff members. And that's actually how I was able to secure my upcoming co-op placement. So through that networking aspect there. And so those are my three co-op placements that I've had so far.
That's amazing. I'm not gonna lie, I did take a look at the Waterloo SPHS Instagram today, and I fully endorse it. It's a great Instagram, really interactive, really fun.
Thank you.
I'm
Thank you.
happy to know someone that had a hand in that. That's great. Thanks, Robo. We'll talk to you in a little bit.
Alrighty.
Next up, I would love Ria, if you could come on screen, introduce yourself, let us know about the program that you're in, as well as how many co-op terms you've had.
Yeah, of course. My name's Ria. My pronouns are she, her. I actually just finished my second year in mechatronics engineering, and I've had two co-op terms. I'm actually on my third one right now. Yeah, so kind of in the middle, right in smack in the middle of my full program length.
Amazing, and I appreciate you taking your evening off to spend some time with us. Can you tell us a little bit about the different co-op jobs you've had? What's been
Yeah,
your favorite one? I know you're not choosing from like tons of them, but what's been a highlight for you?
honestly, all of them in their own way. I think I like each of them in one way and then have something that I honestly actually dislike about all of them as well. My first co-op placement was actually at the University of Waterloo with the Faculty of Engineering with admissions and the recruitment team. So I worked with them for 4 months, which was really a great experience to kind of just be able to talk to people, kind of learn even more about my faculty, and just kind of get to know all the people and do that networking as Robo was kind of talking about as well at her co-ops. And then my second one was my first engineering position. I worked at a startup company. So this company was 6 people, and I was one of those 6 people. And we were a small company in Hamilton, and we did electrical and mechanical drawings for renovations and new builds for commercial new builds. So it was a pretty cool experience to kind of get that experience, like to get that exposure to using AutoCAD every single day and getting kind of really proficient in it. But is it something that I wanted to do for the rest of my life? That was like, no, no thanks. I'm okay with that. But it was a good experience to kind of get to do for 4 months, but then to be like, not so much anymore, which then led me into discovering that actually I enjoy electrical engineering or I enjoy kind of that electrical aspect a little bit more than mechanical, which helped me kind of place where I wanted to be in my next position or my next co-op, which is where I'm at right now. And this is actually a picture of me at work like 2 days ago. And this is my desk at work. I work at ATS Corporation in Cambridge, and I'm a control system hardware designer there. So you can like you can make out as much as you can from my computer screens, but I'm doing some designing work on my e-plan on my computer and looking at some emails that we have from a client that we had just gotten in. So cool stuff that we're doing there. And like I said, this one's pretty cool. I get to kind of talk, I get to do a lot of different things. And I mean, this company is a really good company in the sense of they understand that co-op students are trying to work out what they like. So they're giving them a lot of exposure. So I get a lot of exposure to different areas and also opportunities to come back to the company as well and try out different things too. So things I like, but also things I dislike, kind of at all of them.
Yeah, and I appreciate you being so honest about that. I think oftentimes, when students are hearing from us, or when prospective students are hearing from us, we're talking about all the lovely things about co-op. But as I mentioned, like figuring out what you don't like is a really valuable experience. And while that might be tough when you're actually in the co-op and you're like, you know what, not enjoying this as much as I thought I would, overall, it helps you learn, okay, maybe there's something else that I like to do better. So I'm happy that you're figuring that out a little bit, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Ria. And last up, I would love for Vanita to come on screen. Vanita, tell us a little bit about the program that you're in, what year you're in, and how many co-op terms you've done.
Right. Hi, I'm Vanita. I'm in my fourth year in a program called Environment, Resources and Sustainability. I'm also doing my minor in urban studies and my diploma in ecological restoration. It's a mouthful, I know. I've had three co-op terms so far, and I actually just got my job offer for my upcoming co-op term in winter, which is super exciting. Um, yeah,
Yeah, very exciting. Fourth year, almost at the finish line. Exciting but nerve-wracking.
definitely.
Well, I appreciate you joining us today. And Vanita, I know you've had, lots of different co-op terms. Could you tell us a little bit more about them? If there's been any cool projects that you've been able to be a part of in those jobs?
Definitely. So my first one is actually kind of a doozy. I was working as an instructional support assistant in the School of Computer Science at the University of Waterloo, which is kind of wild because that's not my field at all. But that's the literacy and data science, all of those are very transferable skills across industries. And I had a really good time teaching. So that kind of encouraged me to apply for what my second co-op ended up being, which was environment education and outreach at the Faculty of Environment. This time, where I was taking content from the different environment programs at UW and kind of making workshops from them and going into high school classrooms and teaching those workshops, not just to encourage students to apply into Faculty of Environment, but also to kind of fuel conversation about climate change and sustainability and get them thinking about those kinds of things going into university. And in this photo, actually, I'm at my most recent co-op, which coincidentally was the most fun one. It was at Rare Charitable Research Reserve, which is in Cambridge, so not too far away from Waterloo. And that was a big field job. So I was outside every day. I was pulling up invasive species. In this photo, I'm holding a baby snapping turtle. That was a big project that they had. So we rescued 2,800 turtle eggs from dangerous nests and incubated them, let them hatch in the office, and then at the end of the season, we released them back into their home areas, which was very, very fulfilling, and I'm super proud of all that work.
That's incredible. Did you say 2,800?
Yeah,
Oh my goodness. That is, yeah, you've had such diverse experiences. It's so nice to hear that. I know sometimes students can have pretty like linear paths, and that's great too, but it's always nice to see that someone's been able to try out different things. Even the computer science, or in the School of Computer Science, that job, as you mentioned, not in your field, but cool job nonetheless, good to learn from it. But yeah, this co-op story with the snapping turtles, I'm gonna remember that and tell lots of people about that. That's very cool. And congratulations on securing your job for next semester.
thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, we'll chat a little bit, Benita. At this point, folks that are tuning in, we are going to do a little bit of Q&A. I know we've had lots of questions coming in the chat that my colleagues have been great at trying to answer. If you do have some questions, haven't submitted them yet, please do that now through the question and answer function at the bottom of your screen in Zoom. We do have some questions prepared. Before I'll give our students a little bit of a break, I'll talk about some common questions that we typically get. Oftentimes students ask, what is a specific job I can have for a specific program I'm in. For example, what is a job I can have if I'm in nanotechnology engineering? For any questions like that, if you're looking for sample co-op jobs for a specific program, all of those can be found on our program pages. Also, if you have one of our Waterloo View books that you've got at a fair or at a school visit or something like that, You'll find them in there, but otherwise you just have to Google the program that you're interested in with U Waterloo. Typically, the first link will have a bunch of information on that program, including information on co-op. So that will be available for you as a resource for anything that you might be interested in. Another question that we sometimes get is, how does housing work when you're on co-op? So perhaps I'll tell my students that are going to be joining in. If you do think of some answers for this, feel free to put that in when you're answering your questions. Otherwise, I will note I had a co-op term that I did away from home in Boston. Oftentimes, employers can help you find housing. Typically, if it's outside of the university or outside of Waterloo Kitchener, you'll be moving around, so it does lead to a fairly nomadic lifestyle, which is an important consideration to make when you are making your decisions about university. But sometimes employers will help you find co-op jobs or at least connect with other folks. When I did my co-op in Boston, my employer connected me with a few other employees at that same company that were looking for roommates. So I was fortunate that that was a pretty smooth experience for me, where I just got to live with one of the employees that was already working there. We carpooled to work together. But they can also sometimes connect you with different job boards or housing boards rather that are available in the city that you're moving to. And sometimes you do just have to find housing on your own. But I find that Waterloo Co-op students, because they're used to moving around pretty often, they get used to that process. It is one of the challenges in it, but it's definitely something that can be figured out, and employers will help you with doing that typically. Okay, I would love to ask Roba a question. So Roba, what was it like the first time you went through that co-op job search process? I know it can be pretty intimidating, but what was that process like for you? What are some of the things that you learned from that?
Of course. Okay, yeah, very, very common question because oftentimes you're coming from high school and you're like, okay, all I have is like my, I don't know, my club experience or my part-time job experience, and it feels like that's not enough. What I will say is first, it's really important to just kind of leverage the skills that you do have. That first co-op search is challenging. Like in my first experience, it actually was felt pretty difficult to get that first job. But what I had to do was first not be as picky. So initially I was like, you know what, I'm already living in Waterloo. Maybe I'll live somewhere around in Waterloo, or I'll go back home to the GTA. But once I started thinking about the experience that co-op could be and broadening my horizons a little bit more, I was like, oh, wait a minute, working in Ottawa could be really cool. And if I hadn't made that switch, I wouldn't have even applied to that job, and then I wouldn't have gotten that job. Another thing about like leveraging the skills you had, as I mentioned, I did French immersion. And so I applied to a bilingual job, because when you think about it, not everyone's going to be able to speak multiple languages or have that skill that you have. And so when you think about the skills that you have and apply them to your job search, it also does help a lot. But another thing is like taking advantage of those resources that that you were mentioning, like those cover letter critiques, resume critiques. I literally sat down with someone. I was like, hey, let's look through my my resume and see if there's anything that needs to be tweaked. Because whether you're doing the job search right now in co-op, or let's say you do it, you don't do co-op and you graduate and then you do the job search, then it's often challenging. And so using those supports that you have as a university student, like while you're here as an undergrad, make the process a little bit easier. And plus all the more rewarding when you finally get that co-op job, you're like, whoa, all that effort I put in finally paid off. And so that's a little bit about my first co-op experience.
Really, thanks, Roba. Benita, I would love to know what qualities do you think impressed your co-op employer to get you hired for a certain co-op position, or what were some of the qualities and skills that you really tried to hone in on? That was one of the questions that our viewers asked.
Definitely. So because I'm in a field that's quite niche, and my second two co-ops had a lot to do with environment, it was definitely a plus that within Faculty of Environment, I could pursue very, very specific courses that added to my resume for specific things. So, for example, the summer before my second co-op placement, I did a field course, which means that it's outside rather than inside in a lecture hall. And it was all field work. So I got certifications in things like electrofishing or benthic invertebrate ID, tree ID, ecological land classification. And that's really specific. But all that to say, being able to take courses in university that are related to the careers that you want to go into, and they can be quite specific, and having those skills, holding them, and being able to talk about them in a way that adds to your experience and kind of builds confidence with your potential employer, that they feel confident they can hire you and that the skills you have are going to do well in the job that they're hiring you for, goes a really long way to get you a position and make sure that you do well.
Totally. Yeah. And actually, I'm gonna just have a follow-up question to that. Not really related to exactly what we're talking about, but do you have any tips for students on managing school stress while also applying to co-op jobs? Because as I mentioned, that's happening at the same time. So how do you balance that and still, take care of yourself, make sure everything's getting done?
Uh, Very, very important question to ask because I remember in my phase two being super stressed out about how to manage doing both at the same time. Luckily, I can say now that I've figured out the system, which is essentially writing everything down, write your dates down. Deadlines are super, super important, and for co-op, they're extra important. Just having something written down can go a really long way to remind you that you have something to do. I'm big on scheduling, so I put time slots in on my calendar constantly. And it also helps that when you're on a study term, you're surrounded by other students who are also going through similar things as you. So everybody's kind of on that same schedule. And it's impossible to not talk about it when you're in classes together. So you will be constantly reminded that this is coming up. Are you doing this? Oh, can I see this? What it you it's hard to avoid it when you're on a study team surrounded by people who are also asking the same questions.
Totally. And I remember having like sit down sessions with a group of friends where we're just venting about how tough the co-op process might be or how stressed we are, but going through that with a group of people is so much easier, getting your applications done, doing all that. It's a tough process that's made a little bit easier when you have people to go through it, of course. Thanks, Vanita. Ria, I'm just going to ask you a question. Could you tell us a little bit about what you think some of the common mistakes are that first-time co-op students might make when choosing what their first job that they're applying to or going through that application process? What are some of the mistakes that you think students come across?
Yeah, that's a very good question. That's something that I would love to know when I was first applying to jobs. I would say kind of the biggest thing is don't be too picky. And I think Rova touched on this a little bit before when she was talking about her and applying to jobs. But don't be too picky in the terms of I want to get like a job where I'm making this amount of money or I'm doing this or I'm whatever as your first co-op position. Most of the time it's your first full-time position, if not your first job to begin with. And you can't expect just to start at 100. You do have to expect that you may have to build up to that. So you may work in a position where maybe it's not your end goal, but that's okay. You're only doing it for 4 months or however long your co-op term is. So it's a good place to start off. And I would really just say kind of put that mindset of being able to apply to pretty much a lot of different things. At the end of the day, the way that I look at my jobs, at least in my first two, when I was first applying to my first two co-ops, it was like, okay, I'm just going to apply to a bunch of stuff that sounds remotely interesting. And then if I get an interview, then we'll dive deeper into kind of what do these jobs mean and kind of deeper dive into them. So don't be too picky on what you're applying for, but do be consistent about it, as a lot of the times you will need to put in a lot of work to get in those applications. So if you're putting in, one or two every single day, by the time the cycle or the period and the applications close, you've racked up a ton already versus the night before putting in a bunch in, which I know people do, and it does end up like that, but hey, it's easier to be kind of a little bit at a time versus just in one big set sit down and you're like, oh, 4 hours of just applying to jobs. But hey, is what it is.
Totally. Don't be picky, but be consistent. That is the takeaway from this. I really like that. Yeah, it's definitely just about casting their net pretty wide at the beginning and just opening up those possibilities for you. Thanks, Ria. Question for Roba. I would love to know, since you've had a few co-op terms already, what has been your experience with the co-op schedule and not necessarily having summers off, constantly going back and forth between study and work and study and work. What's been your experience with that?
For sure. So, personally, I love my co-op schedule. It just like as a refresher, that would basically usually look like 4 months of being on here on campus, and then 4 months of working your co-op term, and then 4 months of campus, and you repeat that throughout your degree. And what I love about it is that by the end of my 4 months, usually of school, I'm like, okay, I'm tired. I don't really want to do school anymore, and then I don't have to. I get to go to work for 4 months, and if you haven't worked full time before, or at least what I find when I started working full time, is like it does feel like more of a break than school. Because with school, it's like, okay, you're there for the morning and the afternoon, and then evening you're still doing schoolwork. But in co-op, by the time you leave for the end of the day, like you're done. And so I've always seen my co-op terms as a break. The nice thing is too is like sometimes people are like, okay, I'd rather have my summer, so I don't really want to do co-op. But a lot of times people in the summer, they try to get full-time summer jobs anyway, and so you usually would most students plan to work anyway. And so I like how co-op just facilitates that for me. And so yeah, I've enjoyed my co-op schedule, and I actually don't mind not having summers, because I've only had most of my co-op terms have lined up that I'm working in the summer, and so that's I would have been working anyway.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is like such a common concern that students have when they're coming in is, okay, well, I'm not going to have a break. And I think for students that are coming internationally, that there are more considerations there because, having a couple weeks off between semesters is different if it's going to, be a 24-hour journey to get home in the first place. So that is an important consideration to make. But as Roba mentioned, I think the idea of having your full summer off is something that students typically leave behind in high school without realizing. And then when they get to university, they often feel that they might not graduate with the same skill set that they would need without those summer internships or jobs. So it's nice that co-op just kind of builds that into your schedule. So thanks for sharing, Roba. I'll ask a common question or I'll answer a common question that we get is, what happens if you don't find a co-op job? It is possible. It does happen. There's a few things that we do at the university to help mitigate that when that happens. One, in most programs, you are able to miss a co-op semester if you're not able to find it and still graduate with a co-op degree. But if you are struggling to find that job, we do have a program called We Accelerate, which is open to undergraduate co-op students from all faculties who are going into their first term, which is typically that hardest term to find a co-op job and haven't found employment yet. So this is the opportunity for you to connect with industry professionals, do 60 hours of career development through a curriculum that's delivered by our Center for Career Development on campus. You build a variety of skills in content and activity development provided by the industry collaborator for that stream that you're in. And you also do a lot of project work with a team of students that's given to you by that industry collaborator. So you do get quite a bit of space there to still build your skills, and that still counts as a flexible co-op work term. So that's available to students as an option if they need to do that. Okay, I am going to throw a question to Ria. I know, Ria, you're eager to answer this because you've had some experiences with this, but how do you settle into co-op experiences and become friends with people that you work with? And what if the work environment is not necessarily bad, but just not what you expected from a social standpoint and maybe not what you're used to? How do you adjust to that?
Yeah, of course. I would say be kind of when you go in, kind of have that mindset of like, okay, you're meeting a bunch of new people. And a lot of the times you're going in with other co-op students. For example, the company I work at right now at ATS, they actually hire over 70 co-op students a term. So, which is a crazy amount. And they're not just from the University of Waterloo, they're from different universities and institutions as well. So you're meeting a ton of people. I've actually become like best friends with two other people there, and we literally like eat lunch together every single day and we're just talking all the time. But anyway, that's not the point. So there's lots of different kind of people, and you get to kind of join the company around maybe the same time that other co-op students are and really get to make friends as well. I will say over my first position, I was the only co-op student on the team, but a lot of the times the my supervisor and my boss were actually very just nice people in general, and we would eat lunch together, and it kind of they were the ones who initiated that lunch situation of eating together, so then it automatically kind of built our relationship and was a lot closer. But then I have had the opposite. When I was working at the startup company, unfortunately the environment was just not a talkative environment. It wasn't bad by any means, and everybody was very friendly, but it was like no one really wanted to talk very much. So it was upsetting as I'm very much a yapper. I'm very much someone who likes to talk a lot. And I was going there and I was like, I don't actually get to talk to very many people. At the end of the day, it's not like I was kind of in an environment where I was like, oh, I feel uncomfortable. I just was not able to talk to very many people. So it was kind of coming to terms at the end of the day, you're not going to be friends with everybody. And that not like, oh, you're in an environment, you're always going to be friends with somebody. But, and then also considering that this is also a co-op position, you're only there for 4 months. You're only kind of going through it, getting through that hard experience. And it's a part of learning, I would say. And it's also a good thing to know that maybe something being in an environment where talking to a lot of people and having that experience is very important to you in a job. So lots of learning going on through it. So yeah.
Yeah, great insights. And I think that's like, as you mentioned, you know that you're a talker, which by the way, we got a laughing, crying reaction when
I'm
you said
aware.
that you're a yapper. I appreciate everyone using the reactions in the webinar today. But as you mentioned, like you know what you're looking for. I definitely know people that have gone into jobs and been like, you know what, I'm just there to do my work and then go home and I have this whole other life outside of that I put most of my energy into. And that's cool too. But I truly see co-op as like this opportunity to cosplay as like a real life adult, and you know, and sometimes in different jobs, like you might be in one where it's not necessarily your vibe and what you're looking for, but that exact situation could be someone else's ideal scenario. So it really varies, and it's all part of that learning process, as you said. And you really get to figure out um, again, what type of work environment are you actually going to thrive in, you're going to be happy in, and you're going to be able to stick in for longer than 4 months. So thanks, Ria. Question for you, Benita. This is one that we've gotten a few times, but do co-op employers prefer if you have work experience? If I don't have any, how can I make myself look like a good candidate? So I think this is an important question for first time co-op applications as well. Do do you feel like co-op employers, when they're hiring first time co-op students, require a lot of work experience?
The question itself kind of really depends on the job that you're applying for. There are some things that naturally require certain skills that they require you to have. Um, there are on the job postings themselves, they usually declare whether it's an entry level position, junior, intermediate, senior, and you can kind of gauge whether or not that might mean that you have to be more experienced in certain things before you apply to it. For first time students, in my experience, there's been a bit of leeway, especially when you're applying into a junior position and in an interview as well. The question might come up, you don't have much experience on your resume, but can you tell us about what your passions are, your hobbies? What have you done to further pursue your goals in certain areas that might not be necessarily academic or professional, things like that. I would say to an extent it matters, but you also don't have to rely solely on professional job experience or academic experience when you're in first and second year necessarily.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree. I think, as you mentioned, like the co-op jobs themselves will indicate if they're for junior jobs or senior or intermediate, whatever that may be. And the co-op employers that we work with, many of them we've worked with for many decades. So they know that when they're hiring someone that's in their first year, and they can see through the Waterloo portal what year you're in when you started school. So they know that when they're hiring someone in first year, that student probably doesn't have, you know, 10 things on their resume and they don't have all this work experience and they're just getting started. So I think that's some of the benefit of being in a co-op program like this, is that you are connected with employers that have realistic expectations of what you can provide as maybe a first or second year student. So again, as Benita said, it's not just about professional and academic experience, but from what I remember in my first co-op job application process, although that was a few years ago, the interview questions were very focused on what I want to do in the future, what my passions are, what my hobbies are, what was it about the job description that interested me. So at that point, that's a lot of the research, that's a lot of prep that you can do with the resources you have available to you. So it's not like you need this, you know, this wealth of experience as if you've worked since you were 10 years old in startups. You know, that's just not realistic and just not possible, and our co-op employers know that. Of course, as you get to if you're applying to a senior level position, they're going to want someone that's worked before and that has that experience, but you have say in what kind of jobs you're applying to. And as you go through the co-op process, naturally you will gain more experience, making you more ready um, to, you know, to attack some of those senior level jobs as well. Okay, let's go to Roba. I'm just switching it around here. I love that we have so many students on the call. Roba, could you tell us a little bit? I know you talked about some of those resources that you accessed as you were going through the co-op process. Can you tell us a little bit more specifically about those co-op resources? And maybe something that surprised you through those resources that you learned about yourself that you didn't know before?
Yeah, so in terms of resources, it just felt nice knowing that Okay, actually, like funny story for my first co-op cycle, like I think the very first cycle, I hadn't applied to that many jobs. And then by the second one, I actually got a message from my co-op advisor, like, hey, what's up? Like, do you need any support? Is there anything I can help you with? Like, you're not applying to that many jobs right now. Can I help you? And so that really just shows like the support that is there. Like there are people who are looking out for you to ensure that you are able, like you're setting yourself up for success. And I was really grateful for that because through the co-op placements that I have had, I have been able to learn a lot about like my preferences and what I would want in a future career. Like I've always been interested in teaching to some extent, but getting to have that experience where I was teaching in a post-secondary institution really affirmed that for me because I was like, wow, I really feel like I'm in my element here. Like I loved being able to not just get new knowledge for myself, but also share that knowledge with other people. And then same with that, the social media job as well. Even though that's not necessarily the direct line that I hope to go to after graduating, I loved having that creative outlet at work. Normally, like my creative outlets are like hobbies or like clubs or like just things that are happening on campus. So getting to have that at work was really special to me and helped me realize, okay, I actually also want to be able to have that creative outlet when I'm eventually doing whatever job I end up in the future. So lots of supports that I've had and also lots of lessons I've been able to learn as well.
Yeah, and that actually reminds me of something that I wanted to mention. When you are applying to co-op jobs, you're not necessarily limited. Like the co-ops will be categorized by different fields and different categories, but you're not necessarily limited to applying to a job that's specifically in your field that you're studying and that you're doing your degree in. As we've talked about, our co-op students have done jobs outside of the program that they are studying in. So if you are, a health sciences student, but you have this like passion for design and you have this avid graphic design portfolio, you're welcome to apply to a job like that. And maybe some employers will say, hey, I actually only want someone that's in our global business and digital art program. Or an employer might say, doesn't matter to me what program you're in as long as you have the skill set. So it's good to be able to have that opportunity to explore the different things you're interested in because it is hard to study everything that we're interested in when you are interested in a lot of different things. So getting to do that through co-op is really beneficial. Thanks, Wilba. Ria, quick question for you. Could you tell us a little bit about why you're specifically glad to be part of the Waterloo Co-op program and how have you found that being at Waterloo has specifically benefited you through co-op?
Yeah, I've touched on this a little bit before, but I genuinely
Mhm.
think the biggest benefit of being a Waterloo Co-op student is the ability to try different jobs and understand what you like and don't like. And we've been talking about this the entire time that we've been chatting here tonight. And I don't think I realized how important it was until I actually started my first job, of how important it is to actually find a job that you like. I came into university, was like, okay, I'm going to be an engineer. And then I went, okay, I don't really know what engineers do in terms of jobs. And then I got an engineering job and I was like, I don't really like design work. Now what? And I actually just had a conversation with um, one of the HR individuals at my company talking about future positions in the company that I would be actually interested in. Just kind of talking to him about what I actually enjoyed, what I liked doing, and what I disliked doing in my current job at the company. Because he was able to tell me, okay, maybe you actually might enjoy this. And he actually gave me some tips and pointers to go, okay, for your next co-op, maybe you should try. He actually said I should try project management as a future next co-op instead of design work. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I will try that. Maybe I will try something out, see if I like those things. And I 100% am so thankful that I chose to come to the University of Waterloo and have co-op to be able to tell myself, yes, I actually like this, and yes, I don't like this. Otherwise, I might have graduated, got a full-time position in design role, and then not have liked it very much. So that wouldn't have been fun. So I'm glad that I was able to kind of say, actually, this is not for me, and got on to try something else and kind of understand that earlier rather than later.
Totally. It's definitely a privilege to be able to do that. Super candidly, I think it's pretty insane for someone that's like 17 to 19 years old to know exactly what they want to do at that age and then be able to do that. Like when it happens, it's amazing. And I really commend people who have that direction. I was never one of those people. I don't know a lot of people that are that way. Even if you have a sense of what it is you want to do, there's so many nuances in each job. There's so many different ways that each job can go. As you mentioned, you were like, I want to be an engineer. Okay, wait a second. What is engineering? Super meta question, right? What is
And I was
engineering?
going into engineering, so I should have
Yeah,
known this question, but
but it's
apparently I
hard.
didn't.
It's hard. It's hard. And I think a lot of students are in the same boat that you're in, or will be in that same boat. So it's important for them to hear, like, that's totally okay. I'm getting a lot of like party and heart reactions. And I think part of that is because students are super interested in reacting, but I think a lot of them are also resonating with that it's hard to know exactly what you want to do. So having that opportunity to figure it out is really important, which I appreciate that you've had that experience as well. Okay. I'm going to ask Vanita a question now. This is pretty big, so take a moment to think about it if you'd like. But if there is one thing that you've gotten from co-op that you could give to someone else, whether that's an experience or a skill that you've developed, anything, what would it be?
That is a very philosophical question. And I could say very specific skills or very specific things that I've gotten, but I think the biggest thing for me is just perseverance because job applications can be scary. I won't lie about that. And starting something new is always a bit intimidating. Change is scary. So having kind of the guts to sign on for something and stick to it no matter what it throws your way and being able to adapt and keep going no matter what happens. I know in my field job I definitely got some things thrown at me that I was not prepared for, and it's really nice to reflect now and see that I made it through all of those things, and I had a really good team looking at it as a whole. So I would say perseverance is the thing that I would give to somebody else because truly that is what you need, what I think you need for a university degree and for your careers in the future.
Absolutely. Very well put for, as you mentioned, a pretty big and philosophical question. So I appreciate you sharing that. I'm sure, Roba and Rhea, you have similar experiences as well, and you'd probably attest that that adaptability is a skill that you definitely like to share. So thanks, Anita. I appreciate you answering that. I know we're getting lots of questions about admissions requirements in the chat. Always a hot topic. And I know that one of my colleagues in the chat has put a link to the admissions requirements. We have a lovely website where you can put in exactly where you're doing high school, what curriculum you're doing high school in, exactly the program that you're interested in applying to, and you'll see a very specific list of requirements specific to you. So feel free to check that out. If you do also have a view book, so one of our brochures in hand, you'll see that at the very back. There's a few pages that will cover admissions requirements, and you could download a PDF version of that brochure as well, if you're interested in learning a little bit more. I know we're also getting lots of questions about specific employers, specific employment rates. That's not typically something that we can speak on. I will also say, like, we've had a lot of employers that we've partnered with for decades, but that can sometimes change. So I would hate to tell you right now, this is one of the possible employers you have, and then you build this dream that that's exactly what you want to do when you become a co-op student, and then you don't have that available to you. So we don't typically talk about specific co-op employers other than the ones that we are allowed to speak on, which is the list that I mentioned earlier in the slides. And I will say that a recording of this slide deck and this presentation will be shared with you all afterwards, so you can pause through that and look at the employers, some of the ones that are listed. But otherwise, we don't typically know of employment rates specific to employers. That can change term over term. That can change depending on how many employers or how many co-op students and employers hiring each term. So it can really vary. We don't have the exact same jobs posted every semester, so it's hard for us to track the employment rates for specific employers. But totally understand that that is a popular question and something that students really want to know. I would want to know as well, so I get it. Okay, thank you all so much for joining us today. I will leave it there. I really appreciate you taking some time to join us. I hope you've learned more about the co-op program at the University of Waterloo. Our next webinar is an application info session where you can get your questions answered from our recruiters, admissions experts, and current students as well. It's on January 8th, and you can use the QR code on screen or visit the link on the screen to register. Now, if you do have any more questions that we haven't answered yet, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'll send out a follow-up email with the recording as well as a summary of all the questions that were answered over the next day or so. So keep an eye out for that. But for students that are in Canada, you can email us at liaison@uwaterloo.ca, that first email on screen. For students outside of Canada or anyone that's identifying as an international student, you can email us at international.recruitment@uwaterloo.ca. And if you have applied or have questions specific to your application, please email our admissions team directly at myapplication@uwaterloo.ca. But if you forget which email to email at, pick one, send an email, and we will try our best to get it to the right person. Now, while we will turn off our cameras and mics, and that's the end of the official webinar, we'll stay live for just a few more minutes, maybe 5 more minutes, and just cover off any remaining questions that come in the chat. But just wanted to say thank you all so much again. Thank you to our students, Benita, Ria, and Roba. I know our prospective students and families online really benefited from hearing your stories. So I really appreciate that, and you're great ambassadors for the University of Waterloo. But thank you all for joining, and goodbye for now.